to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, and this is your NBA Draft 2024 Best Bets episode. Unlike Monday's episode, where it was basically Brandon Anderson just taking a dump on every player that's going to be entering the NBA this season, and me talking about how conflicted I am on some of the intel, we're actually going to give you the best bets today. We're going to give you best bets. We're going to talk about a number of angles. We're going to talk about how to bet the NBA draft. To do that, I've got two of the sharpest minds at Action Network NBA. I've got Joe Delera and I've got Michael Fiddle. Joe's on Twitter and the Action Network app at Joe Delera. Fiddle is on Twitter and in the Action Network app at Fiddle's Picks. You can also catch Fiddle's Substack. You can also catch it's Substack. Yes?
Correct.
I'm subscribed. I just needed to remember which service it was on, as well as the Advantage Sports Betting Podcast. You can also catch Joe on the Cash That podcast as well, because we have everyone has their own podcasts. Everybody gets a podcast in today's world, even me. So we're going to talk about all manner of things. I think that there's like a number of ways that are interesting to talk about this. I will talk about what I've heard going into Wednesday's draft. We're recording this on Tuesday at 9 Eastern. That's when we're recording. So I want to start kind of here with you, Fiddle. When we look at the draft landscape, like we've seen a lot of changes where, particularly 2 years ago, the Paolo Banchero debacle absolutely just infuriated the bookmakers to the point of last year we saw a big pullback in markets. This year they were very late to add markets. Now they've kind of given us some, but the limits are very much reduced. What are kind of your thoughts on the overall landscape of draft betting in 2024?
Well, let me add a little more history to that story, Matt. So when Paolo Banchero steams up from consensus third overall, thought to be going to the Houston Rockets that year, it was like he got a secret late workout with the Orlando Magic. His agent, Mike Miller, longtime Memphis shooter, was pulling some strings with some guys that he knew, and Paolo rocketed up the boards. Books were like caught kind of slipping where there was major arbitrage opportunities, and it was in an era where they were using draft markets to try and incentivize people to come in and sign up for their sports book. So there was higher limits and crazy arbitrage situations. I started raising my hands and raising the roof when you were saying that. I know this is not going to be on video because that was a fantastic night for me as a bettor. Fast forward to after that, the books were like, okay, honestly, the drafts don't even bring in a lot of new customers anymore. We already have these people signed up after 3 or 4 years of being legalized. And then they got to the NFL draft where the Carolina Panthers had the first pick, and the coach went and told CJ Stroud, I look forward to playing basketball against you. I look forward to shooting hoops together in Charlotte. And the odds swung so heavily towards CJ Stroud to be the number one. This was a time when no sharps wanted to bet the draft because the limits were so low, and there was a flood of low amounts of money that came in on CJ Stroud. And yet again, the books got caught slipping because it was a smokescreen, and Bryce Young was the first overall pick. So even if the books had stayed true to leaving the markets open, they would have had a good year last year, but they did not. And they've kind of stayed in this zone where we're not going to open up tons of draft markets. We know it's an information game. We know it's a timing game. It's a sourced, like how quickly can you get to the books once Shams drops a tweet or once Woj drops a tweet. Even from the insiders, some of their reporting tactics have changed. Oh, I'm going to be on TV, so I'm not going to report everything. And all of this has kind of created a mushy landscape where there's still some great angles if you're in the weeds for this stuff, but it's not like there's crazy high limits and there's tons of markets to attack. There's specifically a few, and we're going to love to get into them, but it is more limited than years past is kind of the key word I would use.
But we do have a number of best bets for the show today. You can still get a number of actions. I will say, I was glad to see they opened up finally top 3. BetMGM has top 4 exactas that are open there. I put some of those into the app. We'll get into kind of why here in a minute. Let's go ahead and give the bets off the top like we usually do for a best bets episode. Joe, what are your best bets for the NBA draft?
I like Ron Holland top 10, and I like Zach Edey top 10 as well. You can get Ron Holland about plus 100, plus 105, and Edey right now, the best in the market is plus 275.
Okay. Michael Fiddle has two bets.
Two.
What
Okay,
are
I'm
they?
allowed to give out two. So you
I'm
you go.
I'm gonna let you give out the
go.
other one, even though it's, and we'll get there. Give out the two bets.
So I'll go with Johnny Furphy to be the first drafted in the first round, minus 400. And then because I love this bet so much, Reed Sheppard to be a top 10 pick, minus 5,000. Matt is still letting me give it out on the podcast because he knows it's actually still worth playing.
There's an atrocity to give out a minus 5,000 bet. I understand. If there's EV, there's EV. I get it. It's just minus 5,000 is a lot of juice to lay. That is that. Congrats to Fiddle, who has now given out the most juice on buckets in history. That is the most.
Matt threw up before we got on this podcast when he heard.
Got a little sick. Got a little sick to myself. I got some weird ones. So I'll start here. Adem Bona to be a first round pick at plus 300. I like that pick very much. I'm also going to go with Dalton Connect to go 7th, 7-1, along with Cody Williams to go 7th plus 550. So play both of those. That's very important. Play both of those together. I also am going to give out. I'm on Edey under. I think I got 16.5. The under is currently, I think, 14.5. That's getting tight, but I think you can do the do what?
There's a 15.5 at MGM.
Okay, take the 15.5 if you're listening to this. 15.5 I feel better about than 14.5, obviously, but also very importantly, I will argue with Joe about Edey in a minute about exactly where I want this. And we'll talk about a few others that I've got from there. I want to start right here. It's Tuesday night. Currently at BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks, the number one pick in the NBA draft right now, the market, Zachary Risachet is minus 350. Taking more steam, just keeps bumping up. Donovan Clingan is plus 290. Alex Sarr is plus 700. Stephon Castle is 18-1. Reed Sheppard is 66-1. Modest Bazelis is 100-1. Ron Holland is 100-1. We'll stop there. Fiddle, I know that you're not betting this. None of us are going to bet into this market right now. If you had to bet right now for the number one pick, who would you bet?
Risachet.
Okay. Give me the reasoning.
In fact, as you were just speaking, Matt, one of the books that I feel has been a bit stronger in beating the news on draft markets and being ahead of the number actually just moved Risachet to minus 430 to be the first pick, which I think is pretty telling. Still some minus 270s available. So I actually think, well, do I even grab it now? I was kind of just having a panic moment of, do I go throw this in? Landry Fields, I did watch that whole 30-minute interview when he spoke to the media about the number one pick. And the key word that he kept emphasizing amongst a bunch of vague terms was fit. And there is clearly some just miscommunication and differing of opinions within the Atlanta leadership or front office. And if Risachet is the best fit and he's the most kind of like ready-made and most flexible with their current pieces, and that's the way the market's steaming and everyone is reporting it, then at this point, although I probably wouldn't bet it, that's where I would go.
Okay. Joe Dallaire, if you had to bet number one, where would you go?
I would bet Sarr number one. I think the number at this point, it's plus 750. A lot of my reasoning is that I think there's a lot of confusion in terms of what's going on, not only in this draft, but especially within the Atlanta organization. Are they going to be making trades prior to the draft? I know that, with some of the money consequences, it makes more sense to try to trade one of Donovan or one really DeJounte Murray. It makes more sense to try to trade him before the draft, but also in particular before the league year ends, because that's when his contract kicks in. It changes the amount of money that has to be traded around. I think that that's important. And I think that it's important to also recognize that Atlanta is kind of at a crossroads where they are going to be making some changes on the roster. We know that that's going to be different. And when you have the number one pick in the draft, I think that you should be taking the number one talent, which to me is Alexander Sarr. And then even if we look at this otherwise, there's confusion whether or not Atlanta's even going to keep the number one pick. So to me, I don't want to bet into it on what I think is like fit wise maybe makes some sense with the current composition of the team, when I think that there's a lot of not only confusion, but I think that there's a lot of uncertainty. And to me, in order to bet into the market, I would rather buy on a bigger number at plus 750 for somebody that was consensus number one pick a couple weeks ago, the way the odds were looking. I'd rather buy that. Fiddle talked extensively about the confusion with the Paolo Banchero market. And there's some similarities here between Sarr and Banchero having not worked out for the number one team. So it's not a reason that they won't take him. And I think that I'd rather buy the plus 750 right now. If I lose it, I lose it. But I think that it does give me some opportunities to kind of move around a little bit later, depending on if there's trades or if there's some changes in the market.
Yeah, I think like a good starting point here is don't bet heavy. Like, I think if you're going to bet this number one pick, I lean towards Joe from an approach standpoint, Fiddle. From the, if we accept that there's uncertainty, those are markets that you want to bet into because then you get better numbers. You're able to get these better value plays. So to that end, let me talk a little bit about what Fiddle said. Ricochet is obviously the safe pick. Over the weekend, someone said something to somebody or decided to say something to various somebodies that do these drafts, that do the mock drafts. The Gavoni, ESPN with Woo, Sam Viceni of The Athletic, Wasserman at Bleacher Report. Everyone comes out, O'Connor, Ringer, everyone comes out Monday with the same number one, Ricochet. Everyone comes out, okay? So I check in, I'm like, did they decide? And everyone's like, oh, no, they don't know. Okay, so this is my thing. If they haven't decided, and usually when a team decides and they know, they let people know, like, hey, this is good, like, we're doing this. Like, it gets out, okay?
Yep.
So if Atlanta didn't do that, and Atlanta notoriously has too many cooks in the kitchen. I'm not saying that Landry Fields doesn't have power. Maybe that's been like the change over the last 6 months, is that since Travis Schlenk left and Landry Fields got promoted, maybe that's been like we're going to let Landry Fields be the guy, and he's going to make the decisions, and it's done. It's done, it's done, it's done. Okay? That's possible. What I've heard is that the coaching staff prefers Donovan Clingan. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that they, guys disagree. The coaches disagree on the guys that are drafted all the time, and the GM ultimately has to make the best choice for the franchise, not for the coach, right? But ownership has always been meddling with the Hawks under Ressler. That's been a consistent trend. And we don't know who they're going to pick. They could come in and be like, I think we like that Sheppard guy. Take Sheppard. Yeah. Anything is, I'm not saying anything is on the table, although I do think that I was talking to Brandon Anderson today, and I was like, I don't know. Ron Holland is pretty much the consensus number one guy on a lot of big boards.
Yeah.
If it was ever going to be a dark horse out of nowhere, it was going to be in this NBA draft. I'm not telling you to go out and bet Ron Holland. I'm not telling you to go out and bet Reed Sheppard at 66-1. I'm not telling you to do that. Okay? What I am telling you is that I can't understand why we still don't have any word that the Hawks have decided, and everyone's like, yeah, it's going to be Ricochet. The other element of this, and this is what bugs me, I have heard consistently for weeks that the San Antonio Spurs covet Zachary Ricochet, that's the guy that they want. Okay? The Spurs have 2 top 10 picks. The Spurs have a bunch of picks from the Atlanta Hawks from the DeJounte Murray deal. The Hawks also have DeJounte Murray, who the Spurs are honestly open to a reunion with. And now all of a sudden the Hawks are zeroing in, honing in, whatever words you want to use for Zachary Ricochet. It is entirely possible, Fiddle, that Adam Silver goes to that podium tomorrow and says the Atlanta Hawks select Zachary Ricochet. It's entirely possible they select him and then trade him after, right? That could happen too. A lot of ways that this goes. But I personally can't get away from my inclination that something doesn't feel right here. And it's a feel thing. And if we just want to play the numbers, hey, you're getting minus 270 in the market on a number that keeps going in one direction and everyone else agrees on. So maybe it's crazy, but I can't get there. And I'd rather take Donovan Clingan plus 290 or take a shot on Sar 7-1 or get really wild on it. That's where I'm at on the number one pick.
Yeah, I actually completely agree for this number one pick scenario. What we will get into for best bets is that I'm completely okay with playing into long juice for draft props because there are things with an incredibly high degree of certainty. This does not fit that category.
Right.
So this having even a minus 400 number in the market is, to me, also like a false flag and something that I'm not buying, like kind of calling a bluff here.
Yeah, to me, it seems like kind of what you were getting at, Matt. It seems like Atlanta is like saying like, well, we like this guy, and then seeing like how chaotic that makes their phones go, because like it seems like they have this number one pick, and like honestly, in a year where a lot of the conversation is the top of the draft kind of flat, like do you even want the number one pick, or are you just saying like I'm fine drafting at 4 because it's going to be a little bit cheaper and I'm still going to get him for 4 years. So like that's, I think, another consideration here. So to me, it seems like Atlanta just keeps throwing out names to see who's going to call them, because then they'll have an idea not only of who people are interested in, but then like if somebody moves around them or if somebody trades up, they might say like, all right, well, we know that they want to take this guy if they trade up. And if we trade back a couple spots because they want this guy, we're going to still get our guy at like 3, 4, 5, whatever the other number is.
Alexander Sarr is minus 700 at BetMGM to go number 2. Fiddle, I want to ask you this because I think this is actually a good debate. Give me the case for Sheppard minus 5,000 to go top 10. And then I'm going to try and make an angle here for maybe a better play at minus 700 on Sarr.
The case for Reed Sheppard minus 5,000 to be top 10 is that he's consensus mocked like 3rd to Houston if they don't trade the pick. Okay. If they do trade the pick, he's linked heavily to potentially San Antonio at 4, potentially Charlotte at 6, potentially Portland at 7. There is just no chance I'll invoke another NFL draft scenario. The only way that Reed Sheppard doesn't go top 10 tomorrow is if a video comes out of him wearing a gas mask and hitting a bong like Laramie Tunsil a few years ago, and he plummeted. He was an offensive lineman, ended up having a great career. So take note that you probably shouldn't plummet on the talent. But Reed Sheppard, barring getting arrested or tearing an ACL or whatever, is going to go in the top 10. There are so many teams, even the Spurs, who have 4 and 8. Like if they don't trade up and they keep both and he drops to 8, he's definitely going to be there. He's the best shooting prospect since potentially Stephen Curry. Shooting is the best skill to have in the NBA these days. And then you can just look at what does minus 5,000 even mean, Matt? This is where we get into the math of it. Minus 5,000 means that there's roughly a 98% chance that bet hits to break even. That's an implied probability ratio compared to the odds. If you compare what are the chances that he gets injured or has this crazy video come out between today and tomorrow, it feels 99.9995. So it's inherently plus EV from any metric that I could generate, from any mock, from any expert, from anyone with intel, from even understanding his college metrics and advanced analytics. Like there's just, I don't see a situation he doesn't go. It's the closest thing to a quote unquote lock you can find. So to pay into 98% implied, I would do it for $10 to win 20 cents.
Here's one. Is it more likely he goes top 5? Or is it more likely... I'm trying to think of how to word this. Like, he's minus 550 at BetMGM to go top 5. Okay? I would say that he is more likely to go top 5 or after 10 than he is to go 6 through 10. Based off of the fact that I will say this, if he does slide, we do see these slides where he slides a little bit and then he just keeps sliding and he just keeps sliding. And then like he winds up 11. Because the other thing I'll tell you is one of the problems here, I think with the logic is 6 through 10, those guys have draft boards that they're excited about these guys because they don't have to stress over the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 picks. Like, some of these guys are just trying to move out. Like, Memphis is either trying to move up to get Klingon or back. And they like Khalil Ware. Like,
I was about to throw in
right.
to get Khalil Ware.
Right, interact. And maybe that's the answer here, right? It's like they don't get Klingon, and then a team is like, hey, we could go up and get Sheppard at 9, and they grab him. So, like, entirely possible. But I've also heard that, like, the Spurs are, like, very high on Stephon Castle, and then you've got, like, Charlotte would have been my stopping point. Like, I was like, oh, he's either, because I do think there's value if you want to go this way. I think there's value on betting like 3 or 6, because either Houston keeps him and takes Reed Sheppard, or he slides to 6, I think, and the Hornets take him. But if he gets past Charlotte, now you're just talking about 7, 8, 9, 10. Portland's not taking him. I don't think that if the Spurs already passed on him, I don't know that they would go back and grab him. 9 is Grizzlies, who knows, and then 10. Maybe the Jazz are just like, okay, best guy available, grab him. I'm just saying that I wonder if there's just more value, and just take the minus 550 on him to go top 5.
So the reason why I think the minus 5,000 is the better play here, Matt, is not Intel based. It's just being aware of these markets the whole time. And that minus 5,000 number has been left there since Reed Sheppard opened with his top 5 at minus 190. So it was correlated to his minus 190 price, and that is skyrocketing, and the minus 5,000 is still being left there. So I kind of feel like it's a stale number where you could just pick it off and feel like, instead of trying to figure out which one is the more valuable play, one of them has inherent plus EV, so just take it off. If not, if you feel both have value, take both. If you feel a 3 and 6 portfolio take both. Because draft stakes are kind of smaller, then this shouldn't be a situation where it's one or the other. It's a both situation. I myself have just him to go 3rd also, but in terms of a best bet, I'd prefer just the 5,000.
Right. I guess my only issue with like the draft stuff with like getting essentially like CLV in the draft is just like, it's an information based market. And it's like, I think that they set these lines, and then they're not only is it just information based, like kind of on like what they're looking at, but they set the markets, and then because they're both not moving, or like one of them moved, to me it signals more action at the book on like one way, shape, or form. So that I think is always then like an interesting thing, because it's like, is it self-manufactured based on, maybe maybe they just took a lot of action on one player, and one book sees another book move their market a ton, and they're just like, all right, like we need to move ours because they took something, we don't know what it was, but we have to, like, we want to react to that. We don't want to be left hanging. So like, because CLV in the draft is just so funky, because if one thing happens that people are like, whoa, I didn't expect that, then it's not like progressively like that everything else is then going to still fall in line. Like if, like Matt was saying, like if Holland somehow went number 1, then it's like, whoa, like what just happened to the rest of this board?
Yeah.
So like that's my only concern with like looking at like CLV in the draft market. Like I love, like it's great if I have a ticket that like you said, like if you have a ticket at like minus 150 for a guy, and then now you see that it's minus 500, that's great, because maybe you can bet, maybe there's a way to bet the other side of it, like if you really want to try to create like a better position. But like from a market read perspective, that's the only spot that I have concerns, just because of the way the NBA draft is, and like how there's so many intertwining pieces that can kind of affect each other in ways that you don't necessarily think about off the top.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I think it's a really good point, Joe. I think it's important to emphasize that CLV, when it comes to draft betting, is the flimsiest thing in the world, right? This is not CLV, because this is still the line currently. I've not gained any closing line value on it. This is monitoring other markets that had CLV that are corollary to it. So I've noticed that the top 5 Reed Sheppard odds have been moving so much so that this, in correlation to that CLV, means that this should have moved or be non-existent. And right. You look at the other points on the book, there are the other books that had this line originally no longer do. They've straight up pulled it. So again, I think it's more of a situation where it's a play all of these if you like read Sheppard scenarios. But the fact that the top 10 market exists, I simply just don't think it should be there. So it's like I'll play it. I would play it to minus 7,000, minus 8,000.
Let's talk Edey. There's some other guys I want to get to, but let's talk Edey real quick because he's in like a really fascinating name. Okay, so Edey, I think, exists in a very weird space where I think scouting professionals like Edey more than the public does because everyone watches college basketball and is like, what a stiff. And I think instead that a lot of the personnel are like, yeah, but like the details are really good on him. And apparently he's done really great in his workouts. Like he's just had excellent workouts. David, if you want something more than just the ephemeral stuff I've got, how about this? David Aldridge has got a piece on Centers for the Athletic today, talking to a variety of sources. And one of the things that he kind of consistently kind of came out with was all of these different personnel from college coach, pro scout, executive is like, if you go watch him shoot, he's got a much more fluid stroke that he never really played with. And so there's a capacity for him to evolve into this maybe, 5-out type of player. Those little things I think are really important when analyzing because that's stuff that the public is not going to know because they only know him from college. So Joe, you're more aggressive on this than I am, and we'll debate why. Give me the case for Edey top 10. And what's the price on it you got on that?
I got plus 750 the other day. We logged it in the action app. So if you are following me there, you were probably able to get that and to tail that bet. So I still like it. I do think that maybe at this point, maybe under 15.5 is like arguably a better bet just based on the price. But I don't mind like taking like essentially like a ladder or an escalator opportunity here in trying to get him in the top 10. Part of why I like Edey is some of the other things besides the 3-point shooting that he was showing in some of the combine drills. But I like the fact that because he went back to Purdue, I think that the scouting of it changed because he had another year where he put up big numbers, was dominant, was just an incredible performer on the college level. And the other thing about Edey is he's a good, like, not only is he's obviously a big guy. I think there were some comments. He was like, I just like being physical. Like I love this. Like he loves getting into the dirt. And like, I think that that's important because it's a toughness, it's a tenacity. And I think that's something that a lot of teams are looking for. I also think because he's a senior, he went through the whole 4 years at Purdue, that he's somebody that's a little bit more like NBA ready in terms of his size, in terms of what he can do. And one of the other things that he does that I think is super important is he's actually a pretty good screener. And having that ability at the 5 for a guy that people are like, oh, he's a little bit of a statue. It's like, he's not really. Like, he's pretty good. He's got pretty solid basketball IQ, and being able to be a screener from the 5 position with that type of size, you're going to be able to really open up some things for some of your teammates. So I think that there's plenty of opportunity for him to go high in this draft, especially if there's a team that says like, you know what, we don't value the picks that we have in this draft a ton. Like maybe let's try to move up. Like let's take our pick or like move, like, and like the Knicks have, for example, like the Knicks have 2 first-round picks. Like maybe they're a team that says like, let's see if we can package these 2 and like move up or something like that. I think that Edey is a player that can help a lot of teams that are currently in the race. And also like a guy like him with some of the intangibles that he has, who's gone through multiple like NCAA tournaments, played at that high level, played it with all that pressure. I think that he could go and contribute to a winner, to a contending team in one way, shape, or form, just based on his size and based on like kind of all the things that he brings to the table.
If only Michael Jordan was in this draft, we could just pencil him in at 6 and be done. So I have heard in the ethers, in the always reliable information, I've heard 11 Bulls, 13 Kings, 14 Blazers, all connected on Edey. If we get, so I will say this, having done this, there have been times when I've been like, okay, so I'm going to bet him based off of what's the highest that I've heard. And then it's like, okay, well, if he was that high on multiple teams, there's probably teams that you haven't heard that were above that had him just as high. And so it's very easy for him to get into that top 10. My hesitation really has to do with Memphis might just take him, that might be the swerve here, is that Memphis gets there and can't find a trade to go up or back.
Yeah.
And just like is like, okay, I'll take Edey.
Yep.
I actually have like a 9 Eve Messi ticket based off of like, if Messi were to have jumped, which he hasn't, that might have been like a long shot. I don't think based off of what I've heard, again, this stuff is all nebulous. I don't think he's a Blazer guy at 7. I think that they're like, we'll take him at 14. I don't think they reach it at 7. Maybe they do. And then you hit. I don't think he's at 8. I don't know if San Antonio is going to be picking at 8. I don't know if Memphis is going to be picking at 9. I don't know who's also in 8 and 9. If we factor those picks tradability in, I don't know who's moving up to get Edey.
No.
Right? Because it's more likely that you're like, why don't we trade up to like 11 and get him? Right? And then like, Devin Carter slips or something. And then 10, I don't have like a firm on this, but if, there are guys that I'm probably going to bet for 10 with Utah. Utah's also looking to trade. So again, that's not kind of an option. So like, I think there's a way to move this. I do think minus 125 for him under 15.5 is good, because then you factor in if somebody decides that they got a hankering and they just like, all right, let's go ahead and take him. Because if he is on all these lists, it is possible that these teams are just like, Blazers are a good example of this. I've seen this before where there's been 2 guys and it was like, oh, they're going to take this guy before that guy. But then they were just like, we think the other guy's going to be there, so we're just going to take the one that we know we were really worried about missing on later. And then the other guy is still there. So like, if they've got somebody that they've circled at 7, they might think that that player might still fall to 14. And they'll go ahead and take Edey because they might be like, we're not getting past Chicago, Sacramento, whoever to get there. So I think it's got value. You've talked me into this, because if I have I've got the under 16.5.
Yeah.
Now here's one of the things I don't understand. Like, I heard Khalil Ware has killed every workout. So I was kind of high on Khalil Ware plus 140 to go above Edey. So I bet that. But now it does kind of sound like in late days, Edey has definitely gained more momentum. So I think you've talked me into this one, Joe.
And I think you can get Khalil Ware top 20 at like about minus 110. So maybe like that's the way you play it instead. I like what Edey brings to the table. I just think that there's going to be a team that says like, hey, look at all these bigs in the NBA, like these monster guys, like, teams with getting multiple centers, having multiple, like a multiplicity of size, and having just at least a dart with Edey. Like, he's somebody that can kind of contend with that. Like, maybe like if it pans out in a draft that like we all kind of think is like not as good, like maybe he's somebody that you can say like, all right, well, if we got to go play the Minnesota Timberwolves, we have to go play Nikola Jokic, like if we have to go play the Lakers, we have a guy that we can at least throw out there. Maybe he's going to get murdered, but at least maybe he can give us 15 minutes and he's not DeAndre Jordan.
Okay, let's go to the other best bet from Fiddle, which is, you got Furphy. What a name. Give me the idea on Furphy, first round pick minus 400.
So Johnny Furphy minus 400 to be drafted in the first round. One of my favorite plays on the NBA draft board. He's being mocked between 18 and 26. He was invited to the NBA green room, which is an important factor for me when trying to project towards first round picks. They invite 25 guys because they don't want that whole guy on the camera as he's slipping and falling. It's like, get your hat, walk the stage, do your media appearances. I used to work for the Brooklyn Nets when they moved from the Izod to the Barclays Center. So I've worked 3 of these drafts and these green rooms and those things. So I do have some experience with that. It was the Anthony Bennett was the first draft that I worked, which if Ron Holland goes number 1, this might be the Anthony Bennett draft reincarnation. So Furphy also, like, there's these analytic simulations that a lot of these pros do and these mock drafters and these scouts do. And he has shown in the analytic simulations to be a top 5 to top 10 player as a rookie. He's also incredibly young. He has a very NBA ready body. So all of these things just make me say he's not going to drop outside of the first round. I like where his steam is going in the top 20 market. I like the insurance on these things. So give me Furphy minus 400 in the first round.
I don't have anything to object to it. I have nothing on Furphy. I haven't heard anything on him. And so, look, this is one of the things I'm going to have a lot of first round picks in the app. And bear in mind that, like, it's spotty on some of that. I try and target the ones that are either I feel like they have a ceiling in the teens, or if I hear that if they're just badly mispriced. Like I have Adem Bona at 4-1. He's now 3-1 to go first round, because I've heard that he's just like killed every workout he's been in. I've heard he's given everybody the business in those workouts, and the workouts I think are important. They're not everything. Scouts have, like, if you're an executive and watching these guys for long enough, you're not going to be swayed, but it is first person experience. I always think that the interviews are really important from that perspective as well. So I think it's a totally good bet here. I think that one's totally fine. Let's talk about Ron Holland, because you mentioned him. So Joe, you like Ron Holland top 10. Let's talk about him for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, like I've kind of said earlier, and we've talked about just the fact that this is a pretty like flat draft, and I think that there is a lot of ambiguity in terms of where the talent is, or who is necessarily the best player on the board for any different team, right? Holland was like the preseason number 1 pick. That's what everybody thought. They were like, Holland's going to be number 1. And then now I know that there's some skepticism, and Matt, you could probably talk about it better than I can, regarding the G League Ignite and like how that's impacting his draft stock, and maybe like some of the teams where he might fall is what kind of makes this a little bit funky because they just aren't super into that, right? But still, he's an excellent athlete. He's his shot wasn't necessarily there this season, but he still averaged 19.5 points per game, and he was just 18 years old. I know that Scoot Henderson, Jalen Green took a little bit of time to kind of get going, and we're not totally sure what exactly or how exactly they're going to come out here. Jalen Green showed some flashes. Scoot Henderson showed some flashes after, he kind of came back from missing some time. So I think that Holland is somebody who, for a guy that really is still very talented, he has excellent pedigree. He played great for USA basketball, 2 gold medals, was playing at the Nike Hoop Summit. He's somebody that I think has been under pressure for so long and been like in the cooker basically for a lot of teams to have their eyes on him, look at him. I think that he's somebody that players and teams can say like, all right, well, we know that he can put up points. We know that he's a freak athlete. We know that he's 6'8", 206 pounds, 18 years old. He's somebody that can maybe contribute. Maybe he's a little bit raw, but in a year where we're not totally sure how much talent there is across the board, he seems to be somebody that's at least got a lot of raw talent. Maybe we can form him, maybe we can craft him and, build him through our system. So I like him to go top 10 and you can get it a plus number. So to me, I think that's, betting on some upside with Ron Holland.
I've heard Memphis connected with him. That's a team that I've heard, and they're at 9, and that might be, it could be nothing, but it could also be the default, right? If they can't move up to get Klingon, which I think is going to be pretty difficult, to be perfectly honest with you, given Memphis's assets. If they can't move up and there's no sweetheart deal to move back and get Khalil Ware, if Holland's still there, they might just take Holland, and that just might be the way that this goes. So like that's a spot, because I always try, and when I look at these top 10s, I do think some of the trap of the top 10, top 20s is we're just like, well, some team will take him.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, okay, you need to look at each specific situation and see about the connections. G League Ignite, I'll say this, there are teams that I've heard are hard nose on G League Ignite guys, that both Bazelis and Holland, they're just like, nope. Just blanket after Jalen Green, Scoot Henderson. There is not an interest in those guys. Now, like that can, it's you say that, and then the talent is there, and he might be talked into it. But I think that's a factor. I also think though that most front offices are probably not going to be built like that, because if you've got analytics that like the guys, and you've got scouting that are like, look, we've been tracking him for X years, and he had 1 year with G League Ignite. That's going to outweigh a lot of whatever preconceived notions there are about Ignite. So yeah, I think that there is a good chance on Holland. And I do wonder, going back to kind of, this is similar to the conversation with Sar, even though he wasn't an Ignite guy. One of the reasons why Joe's pick of Sar number 1 is pretty good is because oftentimes we see that we go through this entire cycle and we wind up right back where we started, where like Paolo Banchero was the number one pick going into the year last year in that year. Like he was the number one guy going into that season. And then Jabari Smith was number one by like January. And then all of a sudden it was like, and then it winds up being Paolo. Like sometimes you just go full circle, right? And you go through this entire hype cycle and it doesn't matter. It's possible that happens with Holland with somebody, at least in that conversation. So a team reaching for Holland, I don't think is wild at all. Okay. Gotten some good stuff here. I like this. Let's wrap up with a few more thoughts on the draft. So Fiddle, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. We're doing Buckets Live tomorrow, NBA Draft Edition. It's going to be like 7:45 Eastern is when we're going to go on. And we're going to go through the first 5 picks. And one of the things that Fiddle's kind of getting a set for on that show is if-then scenarios. So Fiddle, can you talk for a minute about just if you're wanting to bet this live, what you should be looking to do with if-then scenarios and how to prep yourself for these scenarios if those boards, like to act as quickly as possible before those boards move or are taken down?
If you are planning on watching the NBA draft live, then you should definitely be watching on Buckets Live, because watching these guys walk across stage and shake someone's hand and take a picture is not the most entertaining. And then they'll thank their parents and say all glory to God and whatever. So come hang with us on Buckets Live, because there are a lot of strong betting opportunities that will play out when these uncertainties start to weed themselves out. It's like, who is going number one? Is this a false flag? Are we calling a bluff on this line movement and where this is priced? So like, if Risa does go number one, then I really like Alex Sarr to go 2. And it will be as soon as Silver says the word, as soon as Shams sends the tweet, potentially 4 minutes before Silver even says the word, these markets are going to start moving and we are going to be on them for Buckets Live. If Memphis trades up to the 3rd pick, right? If we're getting the trade is in and we're getting Memphis has traded up and Memphis is on the clock, it is an immediate then Klingon 3rd pick. Or if Houston stays there, it's then Reed Sheppard 3rd pick. So we are building out these kind of intel-based if-then statements so that we could be totally prepared for live betting this thing.
Okay. Yeah, Sarr, I've basically heard the Sarr, like everyone hears Sarr's done. There doesn't seem to be any sort of question on Sarr that he's going second. Fields talked openly about how he hasn't been in for a workout, which is rare that a GM will admit, will talk about when a guy has been or not been in for a workout. I do find that conversation piece a little overwrought, where there are so many examples I can give you of a guy never worked out for a team and they took him anyway. Like, it's just very common. You have the pick. The guy's rights belong to you. You get to take whoever you want. Whoever's in the draft, like, that's part of it, is like you get to do this. I just don't think that the Hawks are necessarily like sold on Sarr. They just don't seem to be very impressed with him. And so I think the Wizards, on the other hand, are. One thing I will say is if Joe were to absolutely jump for joy with Sarr going number one, because he and I both bet him the other day when we were like, this has dropped too much at 550, and now it's like 7.
Here we are again.
Here we are again. I will tell you that I think I would be doing the same thing, Fiddle, where if Sarr goes 1, I would hit Risa Shea 2, like as hard as humanly possible. Like as soon as that gets settled, if there's a report from Woj that Sarr's going number 1, I would hit Risa. Like that would be what I reach for, is not Sarr 1. I would go to Risa Shea 2.
That would be really exciting, because if it's Sarr that ends up being 2, we might be hammering a minus 5,000 live, and that wouldn't be exciting for anybody. But if it's Risa Shea there, you're going to get a good price on that, and that'd be fun.
Yeah. So the 3rd pick, I'll say this, that again, with the caveat that there any number of things can happen, that Sheppard or Klingon, they're number 1 and number 2, minus 190 plus 275. If you want to bet like, oh, I think that this is going to happen. Like, I think that they're going to make a trade. Okay. Well, we got some news that is happening right now. I'm going to need both of you to go ahead and go to Slack and check out what's going on.
Did something just happen?
Via Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, the Brooklyn Nets have agreed in principle on a trade to send forward Mikal Bridges to the for Bojan Bogdanovic, 4 unprotected first-round picks, a protected first-round pick via the Bucks, an unprotected pick swap, and a second rounder.
Complete it. The Nova Knicks.
Woj bomb.
Let's go. This is a real live reaction. I didn't know.
4 unprotected first-round picks, a protected first-round pick via the Bucks, an unprotected pick swap, and a second rounder. Oh yeah, and Bojan Bogdanovic.
Let's go.
Woo!
I love
Okay.
it. Does that mean now I have an actual question besides this. Does that mean that the Knicks are less likely to re-sign OG Anunoby now?
Yes, it has to be.
It has to be. Like they must have they must feel some way about it. I think they probably would still try, no? Like still gonna try to keep him.
I'm betting
I'd say it makes them more likely to really try and trade Julius Randle.
Matt, you're betting the Knicks now? You're late. I bet him the other day.
I would. I immediately went to the futures market. It has moved to 9-1 for the Knicks, is where I'm seeing it.
Let's go. Wow, you guys weren't ready for me to be on this one.
No, not at all. I can't get away from talking about the New York fucking Knicks on this podcast.
This is a Knicks podcast. Let's just say it now.
Wow, 9-1. Yeah, so I think that probably means that increases the likelihood of OG going to
Philly.
Now, maybe that's not the case. Maybe that they're just like, we're going to trade all our picks and we're all in with this core and like that's it, and we'll just re-sign Hartenstein and be done, or let Hartenstein go. But that does kind of increase the odds of OG to the Sixers.
But I'm curious because 4 unprotected first-round picks, is that both picks this year? Because those are like nothings. 24 and 25.
We don't know the details yet. We'll see.
Yeah, because honestly, because if that's 2 of the 4, I'm thrilled. Like that's great. Like whatever. Give me Bridges.
The Knicks are sending 4 unprotected picks in 2025, 2027, 2029, and 2031.
Oh, so they're their picks.
Yeah, not this year's picks. And a 2025 protected Milwaukee first, a 2028 unprotected pick swap, and a 2025 second round pick.
This got wild.
And a 2026 second round pick.
So maybe they are just going to try to keep OG then too. Like, just
go
have
all in, right?
Absolute nails defense.
You play Brunson.
Bridges is
Mikal.
Bridges is literally going to set the
the
record for most minutes played because he doesn't miss games. And Tibbs is going to be like,
you
you're going to
speak
play
to the
45
tradability of
minutes.
Julius? Matt, can you speak to the tradability of Julius Randle? Because you think about the way that the Knicks played in this playoff run and surrounding Brunson with a bunch of switchable defenders and people who could space the floor and move the ball quickly and crash the glass. It seems like a dream situation to have the pick and roll between a Hartenstein and a Mitchell Robinson and Brunson, flanked by Bridges, DiVincenzo, Hart, OG, and the rest of them. And the one that doesn't really fit in there is the one who would want the ball to initiate at the elbow in a guy like Julius Randle.
So one of the thoughts have been kind of like, I'm actually kind of curious now what they're going to do, because one of the thoughts kind of percolating was like, hey, what if it's Randle and then draft picks for Paul George? And that seems unlikely now because they literally don't have any room on the wings for him. And they don't have the picks. So that's out the window.
I feel like, maybe Mitchell Robinson gets moved more definitely now in trying to get something back, like a pick back or something like that. Maybe moving forward if you're trying to like kind of replenish it a little bit. But that's what I would imagine. But I don't know. This broke my brain. I wasn't ready for this.
Crazy.
This was not the trade. This was just not the trade that I thought was going to happen.
They will almost definitely, if they do keep OG Anunoby, they're going to be locked in because they will be second apron.
Yeah, because they're going to have to pay. They have to pay so many people too. They have to pay.
I don't know. But I mean, look, here's part of the question: is like they may clear some of this out. Like they may trade Randle and Hart, even though he's Villanova. They may trade some of those guys to try and get some clearance. This is gonna be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
I think I will say, like, look, this is a weird one for me to kind of get my head around. It's going to take me a minute to kind of get there. Mikal's very good. I don't know, like Mikal's got he's been a little banged up, and I do think this is a much better situation for him, not only because of the Villanova stuff, but just like he didn't want to be the guy. Like he wasn't good as the guy, and now he's just like number 2/number 3, depending on what happens. This does, I mean, Phil, to your point, like I think they want to move Randall anyway. I think it's a question of like who are they going to find to take him?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and what does the salary structure look like to do that trade?
OG has the relationships within the Knicks to wait and be side promised, hey, we're going to pay you. We'll go over the tax. Give us a week to figure this out. We'll figure out a suitor for Randall, and then we'll sign you over the cap.
Yeah, and I'd heard that things were actually improving in terms of the relationship. Like that contract negotiations were improving with OG, and they were like, oh, we think he's kind of going to go back. It's pretty stunning, though. It does. I think the biggest thing here is I think it's actually really good for the Nets, because the Nets are now able to be like, we got our picks back. And if Tibbs runs this entire roster into the ground in 2 years, they're set up very well long-term to be able to capitalize on that. Sorry, Joe, but like that's a real thing.
I think it's a legitimate risk, but at the same time, like if you're the Knicks, if you look at what the Eastern Conference was this year, you have to say like, well, let's take a swing. Like this is our chance. Like we can take a swing. Like obviously, we can go back and forth about the team being injured in the playoffs, right? But like if you look at this, Joel Embiid's not getting any younger, and the way that they're always injured or they have different situations, like we don't know what Philly's going to be look like. And if you're the Knicks, you have to say like, as good as Boston is, you have to look at it and say like the East is relatively open in terms of like where we're at right now. Like let's try to make a swing and build off of what we've been doing so far.
Okay. At BetMGM, it was 9-1. I'm looking to see if it's moved already. Looks like championship futures are still up. Knicks 9-1 to win the title, plus 450 to win the East. Are you in, Joe?
Good thing I already was.
Fiddle, you want in on that now?
No, I just have a question for Joe. Is the Knicks wagon accepting new fans? Like, how's the vibe? Like, am I free to jump over and be part of this train for next season?
You're more than welcome. We accepted Charlie while we were at a Knicks game last year. We were all together. It was me, Malik, and Kenny Ducey and Charlie. And we convinced Charlie to be a Knicks fan after watching them in that debacle of a last minute against the Detroit Pistons in the game that was never supposed to happened. And that's how we made Charlie a Knicks fan. So we'll take our fans. We love some new Knicks fans. We just need another person.
I said I worked for the Nets earlier. Now I can't be a Nets fan. So
I know.
I think I found my new team. I'm moving with Bridges.
In the Slack
across the Manhattan Bridge.
I'm just like trying to think of like what they do if they try and keep Hartenstein and then trade Mitch Robinson for picks. Do they try and trade Julius Randle for like fluff filler and picks? How do they get like? I'm really curious what to do.
Do you just not trade Randall?
You just keep him? Yeah.
He's 2-time All-NBA.
Pay everybody. It's Dolan's money. Who cares?
It's Dolan's money. I really don't care.
This is very weird though, because it's like building a super team out of like really good players.
Yeah.
And Brunson. Like it's like we built a super team out of like very solid players. That's like what they've kind of accomplished here. Man, this is crazy. Okay. All right. That's going to do it for Buckets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to check out Buckets Live tomorrow. We'll have more reaction to this Knicks trade. We will break down all sorts of stuff on the market before the draft goes live. We'll react to whatever the news is tomorrow. We will react to the first 5 picks, and then we'll do another Buckets Live after the draft with Brandon Anderson, reacting, talking futures, all sorts of stuff. Rookie of the year, obviously. Make sure to check it out at youtube.com/The Action Network. Thanks for joining us. Have yourselves a great night. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, Charlie Hutton, the video crew, getting this up on youtube.com/The Action Network. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Till then, let's get buckets.